Paper Mario's latest entry, the Origami King, recently released, so I figured since I have literally nothing better to do, I would go over my thoughts on the game so far. To clarify, I've gotten up to a point somewhere about a fourth or half of the way through the blue streamer, so this video won't be going over everything, but if I ever do decide to make a full-on review on the game, I'll be sure to go over the points I make in this video to expand upon them and see how they've changed. Also, I do apologize if this video comes off as a bit messy. Anyhow, first things first, the story follows Mario and Luigi heading up to Peach's castle for a celebration, only to have the princess be a weird origami mess. Mario falls down a hole and escapes the castle with his new friend Olivia in tow. As it turns out, her brother, whatever his name is, turned the inhabitants of the world into origami creatures. So Mario and Olivia have to set out to stop him before realizing he took Peach's castle and moved it on top of a mountain and covered it in streamers to protect it, after which they decide the best way to stop his plans is by following each streamer to find their sources and destroy them. I think this story works well enough, although I'll admit the way the plot plays it out feels kinda messy, like the beginning specifically wasn't super well thought out. Once you start going after the first streamer though, the plot is just fine. Now about the battle system. This is something people were very skeptical and concerned about with Origami King when it was revealed, because they weren't sure whether or not it would be a traditional RPG like the first two games. Obviously, if you've seen the discussions and news and such, you'll know by now this isn't really the case since EXP was left out of the game. However, what I will say is that the battle system has been much improved over Sticker Star and Color Splashes. So basically, when you run into an enemy, you'll either engage in a wave battle or a regular battle depending upon the circumstances. I'll go over wave battles in a bit, but more or less, the enemies will be put on this ring, then spread apart. After this, you're expected to line up the enemies to put them in an ideal position for attacking them within a limited amount of ring moves as well as a limited amount of time, and if you manage to get them all lined up in good positions, your attack power will go up. Wave battles are the same kind of deal, but enemies will come in groups you have to defeat. Now for a lot of people, I've been hearing they finish battles in one turn, but for me, about a little over half of the time, I run into these confusing enemy placements that almost seem impossible to line up well on my first try in the given amount of turns. Maybe that's just my stupidity messing me up, but I do like that they at least tried to give battles a little more depth this way, even if it can still be frustrating. Especially since there's still little reason to battle most enemies. Like, yeah, occasionally I battle them anyway if I need some extra confetti or coins, but there's just times whenever I really don't feel like battling certain enemies, which really makes them more annoying. Also, cards have been removed, so thankfully that's something else you won't have to worry about nearly as much. However, you'll still need to buy weapons if you want to defeat certain enemies more quickly. These weapons do break, mind you, however, they aren't one-use items like the cards or stickers, so you won't have to constantly be going back and forth to buy more of them or search for them. This might not sound like too big of a change, but for anyone who's played a good amount of Color Splash, you'll know that battling enemies could get much more frustrating if you didn't have cards that were just right for the situations. Granted, I didn't go to buy cards at every stop, but I also didn't like having to go shop for them, so take this as you will. Also, badges haven't really returned like in the form how they were in the Thousand Year Door. They're handled more like neat little upgrades you can buy, so if you get the better version of that upgrade, there's really no reason to switch between them. Partners are a similar situation, where they only show up in the game for the sake of the story, and after a certain point they'll leave your party. You also can't control their attacks as far as I'm aware, so whenever they do attack, they'll do just about like 20 or so damage. For clarity's sake, I'm using Bobby as my reference for this, though I'm not certain if the damage amounts raise with the other partners. It's nice to have some other character to travel with you than just your typical Kirsty type companion though. As for the bosses, I'm a little mixed on them so far. I've currently only battled 3 of them, and out of them I only enjoyed the first 2, but man, the water elemental freaking sucks. There were so many frustrating parts about that boss, like just figuring out how to ground it, not to mention dealing with its water spouts that cleared out any tiles in the particular path. Apart from it, the colored pencils did have one confusing segment, so I imagine the other bosses will follow a similar path. Though I do like them a lot more compared to the bosses you could only beat if you had the specific items, you know, balloons or whatever. And yeah, I do think it's a bit lame that the streamer bosses are just random household objects, but at the same time it is a bit funny that they're basically just the enemies of paper. Exploration is also something that is much more fun in Origami King, since having areas be split apart by levels made them much less interesting to me personally, not to mention making the game have a bit of a better flow with the connected areas, if that makes any sense. It's most similar to Color Splash, with the spots you have to fill in and such, but there are small secrets in the form of the collectible figures and toads you can find. Now before I close out, there are a few complaints I've heard about the game that I want to try and address here. Number 1, coins are far too plentiful and useless, and 2, it's basically Color Splash 2. First off, I'll agree that I think they could have toned down the amount of coins you get from just about anything, because you're given so many coins, and not just from battles but from toads and just exploring. However, I think this was mainly done due to the pricing of the accessories, since they tend to be fairly expensive, ranging from a few thousand coins or so. Still, I think weapons and items should be a bit more expensive since coin rates are a little excessive. Second, I don't exactly agree that it's just Color Splash 2, because in some regards, like the writing and lack of unique characters, it is a similar game to it. However, I would argue this game only improves upon a lot of the faults that held Color Splash back from being a lot more enjoyable. Sure, it's not an RPG in the traditional sense like the original or TTYD, however, in its own right, I think it's a perfectly fine and fun game. Now, I won't go and say this game is perfect, because it's not, trust me, but out of the Paper Mario games I've played, this is the most fun I've had with one in a very long time. However, I would advise you do your research on this game before deciding on whether or not you want to play it, because these are just my thoughts on the game currently. As it stands, I don't think they'll change too much, but do take what I've said with a grain of salt. With all of that though, I'd really like to hear what you all think about Origami King so far. What do you like and dislike about it? Well, I'm Luxon, and have a great rest of your day.